Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best mid laners for patch 6.20. So first up is actually going to be Corki. So these past few patches, Corki has been receiving some pretty nice buffs, and it's slowly getting him back into the meta for mid lane. Corki is one of the best roaming mid lane champions, but he was just kind of outclassed by a lot of the other mid laners a few patches ago because he just didn't have that damage, and he doesn't have any CC in his kit. So if you don't somehow get ahead with Corki in the early game and you don't have any damage, then you are going to be pretty weak. But with these buffs, and also with the new build of Trinity Force into Gunblade, he's doing pretty well these past few patches. He's got that really good mid-game power spike, probably one of the best mid-game spikes for any champion in the game. Once you do get Trinity Force and Gunblade, you start to do a ton of damage, and if you can get to that point before like the 20-minute point, then you can just take over a game with Corki and pretty much single-handedly carry it. He's also one of the best roaming mid lane champions due to his package. So once you do get that, look to roam either top lane or bot lane, depending on which lane is pushing, and just try to get a snowball going for your lanes. Whenever you do have your package up, you don't just kind of want to like waste it and like walk to lane with it and not use it anywhere. Either use it in your lane or look to roam with it. He also does mix damage, so this makes him a really versatile pick, and you can pick him in like most scenarios because he's going to deal AP, he's going to deal AD as well. And when should you not pick Corki? So he is very versatile. You can pick him in most situations. The only time I wouldn't pick him is if your team is like heavy AP, or if your team is like heavy AD, then I wouldn't pick him in those situations, since if your team is heavy AP, then you're really not going to have like any AD damage at all, since Corki does do the mixed damage. And if your team is heavy AD, then your AP damage is definitely going to be lacking. And also, don't pick him if your team does lack some crowd control for team fights. Corki doesn't have any CC in his kit, so if you're lacking that team fight mid lane champion, then don't pick him in that situation. Next up is going to be Cassiopeia. So Cassiopeia is one of the best teamfight mid lane champions just because she does provide a lot of crowd control, some great zone control as well in her kit. She's great against this dive meta right now, and against the champions that do want to try to dive on your backline and get to your carries just due to her ultimate. And if you can time that correctly in a team fight, then it can completely change the momentum of a fight and just end up winning your team that fight. You can transition that into like a dragon or a baron, or it could even end up winning you the game. She's got very strong burst damage as well as DPS damage, so that makes her a really fun champion to play, and it just makes her a very strong champion. As long as you can hit your Q on Cassiopeia, then you're going to deal so much damage and you're going to be able to carry those team fights. She also does have great kite due to her Rylai's. I usually like to rush Rylai's on Cassiopeia unless I am going up against like an AP mid lane champion. Then I might go for an Abyssal first. I might also go for a Morello first. It just does depend on the game, but I usually do like to go for Rylai's because the power spike once you get that item is really nice. She does have a pretty cheesy but really strong level 2 all-in. What you want to do is Cassiopeia, and what I've found works best is try to spam your E on the opponent at level 1 and just try to poke them down to around half HP, and then try to rush that level 2. And once you do hit level 2, if you end up hitting that Q on your opponent, then go for that all-in. At the very worst, you're gonna like blow a summoner and push them out of lane, and at the very best, you are going to end up picking up first blood. Now when should you not pick Cassiopeia? Definitely pick her against dive champions like Kennen and Gnar, any champion that does want to try to get onto your back line, because as long as you're practiced on Cassiopeia and as long as you can time your ultimate, then you can do really well against those champions. Try to avoid champions like Talon and Zed, and also some long range crowd control like a Leona, because Cassiopeia, she can get caught out pretty easily in team fights if like her ultimate is down or if she isn't positioning correctly. So unless you're really confident on her, then I'll try to avoid those champions. Next up is going to be one of the safest and most versatile mid lane champions, being Ahri. So Ahri is just a staple mid lane pick, and she's always a pretty strong pick in the mid lane just because she really doesn't have any hard matchups in the mid lane, and she also has some of the best roaming potential and some of the best mobility for any mid lane champion. Once you do hit level 6 as Ahri, you can't be ganked because you've got 4 flashes if your flash is up, and then you've got 3 dashes with your ultimate, so she's she's just a very safe mid lane pick. She does have that great roaming potential as well with her ultimate and with her charm. So once you do it 6 as Ahri, what I usually like to do is I try to push the wave and then look to roam top or bot and get a snowball going. She's also great against non-gap closer champions or non-gap closer AD carry. So if the AD carry does lock someone like a Jhin or a Twitch or Miss Fortune, then you can pick Ahri and do really well against them. If they do, for example, if like Miss Fortune stands still in a team fight channeling her ultimate, then you can dash in, charm her, and just blow her up right away. Same thing goes for Jhin. If he's channeling his ultimate, then just dash in and kill him. And the one thing that I do like the most about Ahri is that one charm can end up winning you a game. I think this is one of the main reasons as to why I do have a 60% win rate on Ahri this season. It's just because if you hit that charm on the AD carry or mid laner in a team fight and it's a late game team fight, then you're going to transition that into towers, into Baron, into Dragon, or you could even win the game. So I think Ahri's just a great pick because of that. And as for when and when you shouldn't pick Ahri, look to pick her against those non-gap closer champions. Also look to pick her against skill shot reliant mid laners. It's going to be very easy for you to win those matchups because you can use your ultimate to dash out of their skill shots. And don't pick her if the enemy team is very mobile, because you are definitely a little bit skill shot reliant with your E and your Q. And if the enemy team does have someone like an Ezreal AD carry or a Lucian AD carry, then it is going to be a little bit harder for you to assassinate those targets. Next up here is going to be Kennen. So Kennen has been one of the most picked top lane champions at Worlds, but he's also a very good pick for the mid lane as well. He's a great teamfight mid lane champion, and if you guys have been watching Worlds, then you would have definitely seen the potential that this champion does have in a teamfight. If you guys did watch the Rocks Tigers game when Kennen, or when Smeb was playing Kennen, and he went into that teamfight and used his ultimate on like 4 or 5 targets, he pretty much single-handedly won his team that fight and won his team that game. So the teamfight potential that Kennen has is just insane, which is why I do think he's a great pick for both the mid and the top lane. He's so hard to play against as well. If you are playing AD carry or mid lane against Kennen, then your counterplay is very limited because he can just flash Protobelt in and you really can't do anything about that. He's a pretty good laning champion too. He really doesn't have like hard counters in the laning phase because he can farm with his Q and like end up maxing his Q if he needs to. Now when should you not pick Kennen? Avoid Janna, Syndra, and Cassiopeia. I feel like those 3 champions can do pretty well against him. The reason why Syndra can do well against Kennen is because if Kennen does try to Protobelt in, or if he does try to like dive in a team fight, then Syndra, if she's good enough, she can QE and just blow up Kennen right away. And then for Cassiopeia and Janna, it's pretty much self-explanatory. They just use their ultimates and they keep Kennen out of a fight pretty nicely. Also, look to pick him in like most other situations. I think he's a great mid lane pick right now. And to round out this top 5, I have Vel'Koz. So Vel'Koz has been a great pick in the mid lane for these past few patches now. The reason why he's such a strong pick is because he does outrange a lot of the meta mid lane champions and a lot of the strong mid lane picks. Vel'Koz has that insane range with his Q as well as his E and his W and his ultimate. So if he is going up against someone like a Victor or an Annie or like a Vladimir, all of those champions, they are shorter range. They don't match the range of Vel'Koz's Q. So in the laning phase and in team fights, they have to play very safe against Vel'Koz. If they do get in range of his Q, then Vel'Koz can just blow them up immediately with his burst combo. If you do end up hitting that Q on the opponent with Vel'Koz, it's very easy for you to follow with your E because they are going to be slowed. And if you hit your E, they're pretty much dead because your ultimate is going to do a ton of damage. He's got good wave clear as well, some of the best wave clear for any mid lane champion. He's got a very strong, and I don't want to say easy, but once you do get his burst combo down, it can be very effective like in team fights and in the laning phase. What you want to do in the laning phase as Vel'Koz is once you're level 6, try to go for that Q, and if you do hit the Q, try to all in the enemy champion. If you hit that Q, follow with your E, your W, and your ultimate, and they're pretty much dead from there on out. He's a teamfight monster too, which is why I do like him so much. Now when should you not pick Vel'Koz? He's a great pick against like pretty much any AP mage champion just because he does outrange pretty much all of them. try to avoid maybe like Zed and assassins and longer range engage. He can still do well against a Zed or like a Talon, but he does have to rush Zhonya in those matchups, which I don't really like doing on Vel'Koz because it does kind of delay his power spike a little bit. He can still do well against Zed, but if you're not very confident on your Vel'Koz, then try to avoid that matchup. And to round out this video, the honorable mentions are going to be Syndra, Annie, Brand, Twisted Fate, Victor, and Anivia. So I want to touch on Syndra and Victor here. Syndra is a very popular pick now after being played at Worlds. Like pretty much she's picked her band at Worlds right now. So when a champion is played in the competitive scene, they are going to see more play in solo queue. Now I do think that Syndra is a pretty strong pick right now, but she's also a champion that in my opinion does have a bit of a higher skill cap. So if you're new to Syndra and you've never really played her, then I wouldn't recommend first timing her in ranked. I've seen a lot of pretty crappy Syndra players recently that just don't know how to use like their QE combo, and they don't know how to combo effectively. Of course you can still do decent as Syndra if you don't really know what you're doing, because your ultimate does do a lot of damage, but there's definitely a very big difference between an average Syndra and a very good Syndra player. So as for Victor, I do think he is also in a pretty good spot right now. The Morello Rylai's rush does seem to be pretty good right now, and a lot of mid lane champions are going for it, and because Victor does synergize pretty well with the Rylai's and like with the Morello, that power spike is really good on him. He's one of the best teamfight mid lane champions, so if you're looking for a good teamfight control mage, then I would recommend picking up Victor. So that is going to be all for this top 5, guys. If you did enjoy, then don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you guys have not already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.